Well, good morning. Welcome to this panel, Assembling Human Security, Dimensions, Research, and Policy. Our speakers here are Darren Hodgetts, Veronica Hopner, and Stuart Carr. We're going to start with Darren Hodgetts. Is that okay?
Veronica will start if that's all right.
Yeah. Oh, with Veronica? Okay. Let me read her. Let me read her bio real quick. Dr. Veronica Hopner is currently working as a lecturer in the Department of Psychology, Auckland, Massey University, in New Zealand. Her research interest includes military psychology, coping with combat, and deployment experiences. So I'll leave you with Dr. Hopner.
Thank you so much to the conference organisers for this invitation to present at the summit here today. Darren, Stu and I are extremely pleased to do this on behalf of Project SAFE. With the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, and for us in New Zealand having recently and still experiencing the devastating cyclone Gabrielle, never have issues of human security been more salient. According to the UNDP 2022 report on human security, we are in the age of the Anthropocene, or radical planetary change that is driven by human activity on various scales and threatens the very security of humanity. We face significant challenges to human security that are driven in dynamic ways by multiple interrelated developments, including climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, globalization, war and conflict, political instabilities, technological advances, human rights violations, and ever-increasing wealth and economic inequalities. In response, scholars and policymakers have been conceptualizing human security as a dynamic construct that is coming of age in this current epoch of disruption and change that spans both human and non-human systems. Scholarship regarding human security highlights the need to look holistically and contemporarily at the complex relationships between local activities, global systems, and the security of the planet and all its inhabitants. We have developed an orientation towards human security that is informed by assemblage or assemblage theory to begin grappling more holistically with the complex relationships between human and non-human elements in the assemblage of security concerns. This orientation offers one way of considering the complexities of human security, and we'll take you through this in this presentation, and how we might respond to various dimensions of it through policy. Reflecting the need for multi-scale and dimensional focus, initially the United Nations UNDP, again in 1994, conceptualized human security in relation to 7 interconnected dimensions. First was personal security, 2nd health, 3 food, 4 environmental, 5 community, 6 economic, and 7 political. Each dimension carries a focus on a related aspect of what is needed to advance human security. For example, personal security is linked to access to effective healthcare and is influenced by economic conditions and the means to secure basic resources such as food and socio-cultural resources such as community cohesion. Reflecting the ongoing developments of scholarship on human security, in a recent publication in 2021, Carr and his colleagues added 2 further dimensions: 8, national security, which focuses on the protection of countries from traditional and non-traditional threats; 9, cybersecurity, which encompasses the safety of information technology, critical infrastructure, and associated digital hazards. The empirical research we have conducted since 2019 into all of these dimensions has shown that these facets of human security are independent and form a human security staircase that may be gauged and addressed by matching policy configurations. In an age of major climate change, socio-economic disruptions, and where distinctions between domestic and foreign/global are warping, we also need to consider a further dimension, 10, global security.
Thanks, Amanda. Sorry, thanks, Veronica. I'm just going to go through the assemblage orientation a little bit and hopefully link that to a couple of exemplars. So assemblage theory orientates us towards seeing the world as an evolving social and material ecosystem that takes shape through various dynamics of stability and instability across a nexus of assemblages. This theory offers a dynamic framework for understanding interconnections between parts or elements and wholes or assemblages. It was introduced by French philosophers Deleuze and Guattari as a way, pardon me, of making sense of processes via which any whole or entity, from molecules to natural ecosystems, species, and cultures, take form. Similar processes of emergence have been found to occur across these various wholes and on different scales. For those of you interested, Savage in 2020 offers what we found to be a very useful overview of the use of assemblage theory in policy research, noting that this theoretical orientation can extend our understanding of the ways in which policies manifest and then often mutate in complex systems at the local level, but also at a transnational level in many instances. Applying assemblage theory also requires some joined up thinking regarding dynamic interconnections between various policy domains, or in this case, our 10 dimensions of human security, as parts of a much larger kind of system within which persons and communities are located. Assemblage theory is also particularly useful in grappling with complex phenomena such as human security because of the emphasis placed on relationships between heterogeneous parts and how these cohere to form broader systems and corresponding policy initiatives. Of key importance is the emphasis placed on how different parts of a given dimension of human security are held together in what is referred to as a geography of relations that can change substantively over time and in relation to evolving events. So we have a dynamic orientation to complexity. Approaching human security as an assemblage, we can explore how the 10 dimensions its 10 dimensions take shape in relation to different human and non-human parts. The connections between the 10 dimensions can be seen as this geography of relations that is also embedded within power structures that bring further complexities that in the case of human beings relate to cultures, genders, classes, places, and so forth. The idea that assemblages constitute much more than the sum of its parts, or this is a core idea of the theory, is central to understanding the dynamics of social systems and policy applications, whereby through new combinations of parts, we can see different consequences emerge. For example, in recent years, our country decided to partially privatize the power system or the electricity grid and delivery system. Now, this led to the introduction of prepaid power meters, particularly for low-income householders, who then ended up being charged the highest wattage rates of any household. This unaffordability has contributed to houses not being heated properly, which in turn contributes to higher respiratory rates or respiratory illness rates among children. This, of course, has a knock-on effect in terms of the costs to the health system, which are quite immense over the life course of these children as they grow up. Now, this situation has resulted in the introduction of one policy around electricity and so on having an impact on other areas or domains such as health, but it can be reassembled in such a way to actually mitigate the negative impacts of the policy. So we might increase household economic security and promote the security of inhabitants by shifting the policy to regulate wattage rates or to subsidise households, which has been done through the introduction of a winter energy payment from the government.
The Russia-Ukraine war also shows us how various dimensions and elements of human security can assemble, cohere, shift and change on much larger scales. For example, artillery shelling, bomb explosions and troop movements have wreaked havoc on key elements in the form of natural and built infrastructures. This has led to severe environmental destruction with the contamination of water sources, damage to sanitary systems, widespread deforestation, and significant drops in air quality. Agricultural production has also been severely disrupted, exacerbating food security both now and for the foreseeable future. The impacts of these shifts in relations between the key dimensions of these 10 key dimensions of human security are not restricted to the Ukraine. They've had implications for NATO policies and strategies, which we'll unpack a little bit further, as well as energy and food security in other nation states. Both Russia and Ukraine are major exporters of grain, energy, and fertilizers, and the disruption to the production and transporting of these commodities has increased prices, contributing to rising inflation globally, which in turn has impacted global economic security. In terms of the specific policy shifts, by 2022, the world leaders presented in this slide and others have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. At a policy level, they have acted to provide aid to Ukraine. The EU has also imposed policies of unprecedented sanctions on selected Russian individuals and organizations in areas of travel, banking, and some forms of trade, transport, and the media. Also evident in their responses, however, is the need for pragmatism and compromise. For example, there is no restriction on Russian exports of food and agricultural products because food security remains a major priority for the EU. Further, in order to reduce gas imports from Russia, the EU has begun to reassemble its supply chain, with new relations emerging between alternative suppliers. But adding further complexity to this, there have been critiques from some human rights activists who argue that repressive regimes who could be potential alternative suppliers may leverage energy deals to circumvent accountability for rights violations. These violations in turn impact personal, community, and political insecurities in both anticipated and unanticipated ways.
So understanding human security as a dynamic process of emergence, evident in such exemplars, which feature a geography of relations that can shift between key dimensions and parts, allows for an in-depth consideration of the consequences of particular policies or parts that target one dimension, but often have consequences for other dimensions of human security. Central to the research process is to unpack this geography of relations, to consider how relations between dimensions and particular parts can morph in response to particular policies and situations as these develop. A key focal point in much of our research is on economic insecurities that come with growing inequalities and unlivable wages that impact other domains of human security, such as the health, community, and so on. This orientation is crucial for understanding the efforts of our present progressive government to address policy problems such as endemic in-work poverty and precarity. So, for example, due to rampant inflation driven mainly by international developments, including the conflict in the Ukraine, the New Zealand government will raise the minimum wage by a further $1.50 an hour on the 1st of April this year. Using assemblage theory, we can see how raising the minimum wage alone is unlikely to resolve or even do much to mitigate issues of economic insecurity that many families face today. When using policy to raise wages, it is also necessary to consider the nexus of related policies that can be impacted, such as those related to existing government housing and welfare supplements, or what's often referred to as cash transfers. We might also think about regulating more affluent groups who contribute to increased poverty, such as private landlords, through rent freezes to stop them from extracting any additional income out of the households in need. So some simple numbers might help with this exemplar around the $1.50 minimum wage rise. Recently, the progressive economist in New Zealand, Susan St. John, has argued that the minimum wage policy will not work as intended to alleviate economic insecurity. St. John calculates that actual income boost accrued by households will be minimal. These numbers are for a household with two parents with a combined 60 hours of work on the minimum wage per week. One's working 40 hours, one's working 20 hours, and they have two dependent children. This point is important in relation to policies around cash transfers from government that target families. On paper, their income from a minimum wage rise of $1.50 will increase their incomes by $90 gross a week, or an annual increase of $4,680. However, this projected boost does not include both parents paying an additional $819 in income tax. They will also lose 27% or $1,264 of their working for families cash transfer from the government, and a further $1,170 from a reduction in the government accommodation supplement. If they have student loans, an extra $5,662 per year will go in repayments. We also have, you can't sue for accidents in New Zealand. We have an accident compensation corporation, but it leverages off salaries and wages, which means that these deductions will take further money as well as any contributions to the National Superannuation Scheme. So what happens in actuality is that the households are only going to be left with $655 per year, or $13 per week in additional annual income. So in actuality, the additional income from the rise in the minimum wage is taxed at 86%. And this isn't actually even accounting for any increases in rent, because when wages go up, rents tend to go up as well. So this means little reward for the households and further pressure on the bottom line of businesses still recovering from COVID. A key aspect of the minimum wage policy being unlikely to have the unintended positive consequences of enhancing economic and related securities is the failure to adjust other policies or parts of the economic assemblage in order to account for the impacts of the policy as it actually is applied in the real world.
Oh, kia ora, Darren. Kia ora, Veronica. Kia ora koutou. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. It's a privilege. As Darren was saying, he was talking about the economic assemblage, and I guess the closest thing we've got to a policy framework that tries to capture the assemblage would be the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we're just going to look at those now. Veronica, could you please flick through the slide? Thank you. As we know, the SDGs are 17 human development goals. They've been described as the most ambitious grand plan for human development. They're very aspirational, and they are basically focused on eradicating poverty in all its forms everywhere. They run from 2016 to 2030. And the primary goal number 1, which is at 1 o'clock on the clock face there, is eradicating poverty in all its forms everywhere. And what the goals are saying is that poverty is not inside people's heads. Poverty's out there in policy frameworks, for example, that are not working for people, and they create a lack of opportunities, really. So eradicating poverty in all its forms everywhere requires addressing at least 16 other undergirding forms of poverty of opportunity, which can be broken by good policies and exacerbated by bad ones. So, for example, SDG 2, which is zero hunger. So not having access to decent food and going hungry is a poverty of opportunity, which then impacts into SDG 3, which is health and well-being, which includes, for example, not having decent access to health services and so on. Good health is a foundation of benefiting from an equitable education, quality education, another opportunity or poverty of opportunity if it's not happening. And that, of course, has to be equitable across genders. So educational opportunities need to be equitable across those. SDG 5, having access to clean water and sanitation. SDG 6, very essential for eradicating poverty in all its forms everywhere, as is access to clean energy. Number 7, and affordable energy, as many of us know. Into access to a sustainable, decent livelihood. Number 8, through inclusive infrastructure and industrialization, number 9, which will help to address poverty and inequality, number 10, and address and make cities and communities more inclusive and sustainable, number 11, through sustainable consumption, number 12, which will require climate action, as we can all see through our own eyes today, number 13, which involves protecting life under the water and on land, 14 and 15, and altogether will maybe enhance human security, peace, justice, and so on, number 16, and which is closest perhaps to human security, and then into partnerships for the goals, which is the only process goal, which basically says that the only way we're going to achieve these goals is if we all work together in partnerships. As we can see, those goals are interlinked. So they suggest the idea of some kind of assemblage, but they're not policies, they're goals. And I guess one of the criticisms of the United Nations goals, and the same can be said for the Sendai framework, which is around prevention of disasters and management of disasters on the right, is that they've been criticized for being too macro. So they're up there, they're a grand plan very much, and that's a strength and a weakness. So they're overarching and grand, but they're difficult to operationalize in everyday life. And if we take some of the operationalization attempts inside the goals themselves through all the targets and indicators, we might take, for example, reduce the homicide rate, which would fall under 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, perhaps, human security. And we can take, let's say, number 8, decent work, my own field. And we can see there that does have actually increased the employment rate, reduced the unemployment rate. And we know on a common sense basis that employment rates can be related to homicide rates and vice versa, but the goals don't really tell us how they're linked together. And what we need to do perhaps is take them off the billboards and bring them down to street level. And that way we might be able to see how various policy assemblages can link together in human experience to enhance quality of life and so on, and help to obtain that primary goal, SDG 1. Veronica, can we move through to the next slide, please? So what we've been thinking is, if we look at all those supposedly integrated goals, and we've got them on the left-hand side of the diagram here, and we've taken the facets of human security proposed by the United Nations, and more latterly the ones proposed to be added by us, which numbers 10, as Veronica said. And we can go through all of the goals, in fact, all 17 are represented on the left, and map them across to those facets of human security. So SDG 16, for example, which mentions things like murder rates, might be quite closely linked to personal security, i.e., as Veronica said, living free from violence. SDGs 3, 6, and 7, which is access to healthcare, clean water and sanitation, and a clean and affordable energy, can obviously, as we can see right around the world today, be related to health and protection from illnesses, from cold, and so on, and access to care. And we can run through the lists there and actually start to see that, yes, we can take these 17 goals and map them into everyday experience at street level for people, human beings in everyday life. I won't go through all 17 because you can see how they link across, I'm sure. Veronica, could we have the next slide, please? If we look at the slide here, we can see that one of the things we've been thinking about is, well, look, why don't we, if we can capture these forms of human security in some kind of integrated measure, we might be able to do some real-time social science policy monitoring. What gets measured gets managed, as Peter Drucker said. But if we can do that in real time, we can look to see what effect changing these policy assemblages might have on the assembled experiences of people in everyday life. And for that, we need an integrated measure. And I've underlined the word integrated there because, as Veronica said, we have developed a human security staircase scale. It's quite a basic scale that asks people, have they got or not the 10 kinds of human security that we outlined earlier. In what sense are they integrated? Well, first of all, when we ask, and we've done research on this across Australia and New Zealand and more latterly into Southeast Asia with our colleagues there, and we've kind of found a consistent pattern. We've done it at different times and after different big security events like a Christchurch shooting here and COVID-19 and so on. And what we found is that there is the yeses and the nos on those, do you have those 10 types of security, are not randomly distributed. They're distributed in a pattern. So people are more likely to say, yes, I have it, when it's more proximal to them. So personal security is something that's very proximal to me. I can do quite a lot very often to control it. But the further away they get from proximal towards more distal and macro level rather than micro and proximal, so we get out to political, national and global security, the less likely people are to say, yes, I have it. And maybe that's because they can't control it. But it does suggest that these dimensions of human security form a ladder of difficulty, easier to say for the more proximal, harder to say for the more distal. That's why we've got the ladder on the right. We've actually called it a human security staircase scale because they are arranged in an order of difficulty. And what we also found, so they're integrated in that sense, like a staircase is integrated into a stairwell and so on. But they're also linked together through cohesiveness. So if somebody says yes to one, they're more likely to say yes to the next on the average in general, suggesting that we have a cohesive, internally consistent, as it's called, measurement scale. So what we can do is give people a score out of 10 on human security, which walks people through those different facets and tells us how high up the staircase currently people feel. And that means we can start to monitor the impact of policy assemblages, various policy assemblages, and attempts to restore senses of human security when it's been threatened by these assemblages. And we're actually working on developing an app, a human security app, which will incorporate these 10 dimensions and which can measure effects of policy assemblages, hopefully in real time, across nations, across regions, within towns, cities, and so on. Beyond that current proof of concept, we're also thinking, look, we need to get much more serious, I think, about thinking about what do we mean by human security in everyday life? So, for example, having it, saying I've got health security, I've got community security, I've got cyber security, is not quite the same thing as valuing it. And when we say valuing something, we're saying we're getting close towards human capabilities, actually valued functionings. And if we can, we can assess how much they are valued, we can start to use weightings to get more sophisticated measures of that human security as a result of policy assemblages. We also need to start thinking about differences between, taking a leaf out the Global Happiness Report, about the differences between hedonic, or in the moment, more ephemeral forms of security, fleeting senses of fear, danger, and so on, alongside more eudaimonic elements and ethoses, like which are more deep-seated and longer lasting. And once we start doing that, we might actually partly explain something that we've observed in our research, which is that the order of difficulty in the staircase changes. So in different circumstances, after different events, some of those rungs on the staircase or the ladder on the right are actually interchanged. And so the running order of difficulty and the things that people feel that they don't quite have, and the way to get towards them by securing ones that precede them, changes. And that suggests something a little bit more hedonic than eudaimonic. And interestingly, those changes seem to happen at the middle, the more mid-level, not the micro or the macro level, which suggests that policy assemblages are able to shift that sense of human security that people have, and I'm sure value greatly. So I think those are a few examples of where our research is heading. But I think what we're saying is we're looking at this in very practical terms. How do these policy assemblages translate into assemblages of human experience? Kia ora koutou. Thank you. I think that's us. Q&A.
Did anybody have any questions?
I can see that we've got 9 participants, so there are some people out there. I think maybe it's important to say that if people want to contact us, we'd love to be there with you all. If people want to contact us and ask us questions about the presentation, or indeed if you want to make a link, because we're very interested in forming new partnerships, as we said, and we'd like to connect to the network here at DuPont. And thank you for having us, because it's very kind to have us here.
We don't have any questions, but maybe you can expand on what you've been commenting, because we still have half an hour to go. So
Oh, that's okay. We can wrap it up if there's no questions. That's fine.
I don't see a question.
With no questions and no one here in the room, did you all just want to wrap it up and I can end the session?
As should we?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you want to wrap it up. Mhm.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for your participation.
Oh, thanks, Anna. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
You
Yeah,
too.
eh?
Bye.
Yeah, bye.